If I would say the words Hatfields and McCoys, how many of you would know who I'm talking about? Of course, most of us would. These are two people that lived on either side of the Tug Fork along the Big Sandy River that separates West Virginia and Kentucky. The Hatfields lived on the West Virginia side. The McCoys lived on the Kentucky side. There was a feud that broke out among the families that lasted from 1863 until 1901. It was a 38-year feud. But do you know what really got it all started? Well, the first real violence was the death of Asa Harmon McCoy as he was returning home from war. Devil Anstey Hatfield was the suspect at first, but it was later confirmed that he was homesick during the time of the murders. It was widely believed that his uncle Jim Vance, a member of the Wildcat, committed the murder, but no one really knows for sure. The second recorded incident came over a dispute of an ownership of a hog. So today we are opening up the 14th chapter in the story. And you know, we might call this chapter the Hatfields and the McCoys. Because let me tell you how it all came down. Let me give you a little introduction of the story of the division that we see in Israel. It started through the prophet Ahijah, that God sent him to a rising young star in Solomon's administration by the name of Jeroboam. And he told him that he would be the future king, that God would give Jeroboam all but one of the tribes of Israel. Now, after possibly making a premature bid for the throne, Jeroboam learns how to wait for God's timing. Solomon was not ready to relinquish his throne yet, so he tried to kill Jeroboam to keep him from becoming king. So Jeroboam ends up fleeing to Egypt, and he waits there for his next opportunity. Now, after Solomon died, his own tribe of Judah, they automatically accept his son, Rehoboam, as the next king. But much of the population, especially from the other tribes, had grown to resent Solomon's heavy taxation and his conscripted labor for his grand projects. As representatives from all over Israel gathers together, they make Rehoboam king, but they also make for sure they make their complaints known. Jeroboam hears that they have made Rehoboam king, so he heads back from Egypt to Israel to see if Rehoboam might be a little less harsh on the people than his father was. And Rehoboam first goes to the elders who served his dad, the older, more experienced guys, to get their opinion. And they give him wise advice. In 1 Kings 12:7, it says, "If you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servant." Well, Rehoboam, he rejects their advice. And he goes to some young men that he grew up with. This is what it says in verses 10 through 12. It says, "The young men who had grown up with him replied, 'These people have said to you, your father puts a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions.'" And it's at this time that the nation of Israel divides. Of the 12 tribes of Israel, only those living in the town of Judah stay with Rehoboam. The rest rally behind Jeroboam, and they make him their king. So as 10 out of the 12 tribes, they form the nation of Israel to the north, and the tribe of Simeon is kind of mixed in with Judah, and they form the nation of Judah to the south. Now, this division took place around 930 BC, and it remained throughout the rest of the Old Testament. That's 530 years. Now, division is a nasty place to live. I mean, it churns in our stomachs, it bulls our anger, it robs us of our joy. It ruins weddings. It devastates churches and the church's witness to their community. It dashes hopes and dreams. It crushes the spirit of innocent children. Jesus told us a house divided against itself cannot stand. A house. It can be a family. It can be an individual. It can be a church, a business, or in this case, it could be an entire nation. I mean, there are so many outside forces that threaten our unity and our stability, but they can be overcome if we have unity on the inside. But once a house on the inside turns against itself, it's just a matter of time before that house falls. So what can we learn to avoid division in our lives? I mean, there's a host of principles that we could go over to promote unity and hold division at bay. Let us focus our attention on just a few things that we can learn from Israel. What can we learn from Israel to help us avoid division in our lives? Well, first of all, we can learn to be careful of who you listen to. Because, I mean, it's pretty easy to see the rookie mistake of Rehoboam. He rejects the advice of the elders. He embraces the advice of the young men that he grew up with. I mean, think about it. If you only listen to people that your own age, you don't take advantage of people who has experienced the very same situation that you are. And you find yourself making the same mistakes that they do or did. And that's why I love the quote that says, "Learn from the mistakes of others. You won't live long enough to make them all yourself." Or there's a more straightforward quote that says, "You're all idiots if you think you can learn from your own experience. I prefer to learn from the experience of others to avoid making them myself." You know, that was the first mistake Rehoboam made. But there's more. I mean, these are guys that he grew up with. And now he's the king. What is the likelihood that they're going to tell the king some bad news or some tough news, some things that he might not want to hear? I mean, the cost is just way too high for them. You know, I find it a true general rule for all of us that our friends are generally inclined to tell us what we want to hear. Our friends want to please us. They don't want to drive a wedge in our relationship. You know, I think we must be aware of that. That's why Proverbs 27:6 says, "Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses." You need to have friends around you that will tell you the truth. If you're wise, you will beg them to tell you the truth. Some hard things that you really don't want to hear. At the time, it may feel like a wound, but in the end, it will save you. It will promote the bonds of unity. If you are the friend who is approached to give advice or counsel to another friend in a relationship, a conflict with somebody, another friend, a spouse, a coworker, or a neighbor, let me give you two pieces of advice. First of all, ask permission right up front if you can tell them things that they may not necessarily want to hear. And don't ever give hard counsel without listening to the other side of the story. You know, we can't help ourselves the way that we spin a story. If just one person controls the narrative, you can almost bet that you're going to give bad advice. So also seek the permission to hear the other side of it. Which leads us to our second point. Division is seldom one-sided. So own your part. At first it appears that Rehoboam is the one that is completely in the wrong here. But when you get the whole story, you see that Jeroboam plays a part as well. First, before Rehoboam ever comes on the scene, Jeroboam is told by a prophet that he is going to be king. So what does he do? He takes matters into his own hands. He makes a move for the kingdom from Solomon. It's Rehoboam's dad. The attempt fails. It's outside the timing of God, and it causes him to flee to Egypt. Jeroboam's ambitious. He wants the position, and he wants it now. And after he gets what he wants, we learn that to keep the people from going back to Jerusalem and worshiping God there and offering up their sacrifices, he ends up making 2 golden calves. And he sets them up for the people to worship and to sacrifice to them. And the scriptures tells us, and this thing became a sin. So God sends a prophet to Jeroboam to confront him, and the results we see in 1 Kings 13:33. It says, even after this, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways. Now I know that I've only been married for about 5.5 years. I've only been here for about 4.5 years. I've been in ministry, though, around 16 years. And I've only seen on a handful of occasions where division was one-sided. Now, it's seldom 50-50, but nonetheless, both parties attribute to the division in some way. And you can't control what the other person does, but you can control your part of it. And I find the posture and the humility that comes with that, it's the best environment for healing. Because we need to know that division has a generational effect. Because this squabble between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, it ripples down throughout the families for generations. I mean, just listen to these passages. It says there was a continual warfare between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. There was a war between Abijah and Jeroboam through Abijah's lifetime. There was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, throughout their reigns. I mean, this division, as we said, it took place somewhere around 930 BC, and it continues through this quarrelsome relationship from that day on. I mean, think about it. Remember during Jesus' ministry? He met a Samaritan woman at the well. Well, the Samaritans are the remnants of the Jews still living there from the northern kingdom. That's established by Rehoboam. The Jews from the south, from Rehoboam's kingdom, or Judah, they despised the Samaritans. They despised them so much that they would go out of their way to walk around Samaria just to avoid ever having contact with them. Division can ruin families for generations, like the Hatfields and the McCoys. When you decide to destroy a relationship, remember, it usually runs through the generations, which leads us to the next point. Rehoboam and Jeroboam are not the ones who struck the first match of division. It was Rehoboam's dad, King Solomon. You remember from last week, King Solomon was doing great for a time. He was filled with the wisdom of God, and he was reaping its benefits. But little by little, he stopped applying that to his own life and to the kingdom. And it's just like a frog that's dropped in a pot of boiling water. It's going to immediately jump out. But if you place it in a pot that's lukewarm, and you slowly begin to heat it up, you can cook them to death. Because by the time that it's aware of what's happening, his body just can't respond anymore. Solomon began to marry foreign women to establish political allegiances or alliances with the surrounding nations. He had 700 wives in all. He had 300 concubines, which are like second-hand class or second-class wives. They're dedicated mistresses that the king could call on at any time. And these foreign wives, they worshiped other gods. And they talked Solomon into building them temples that they could worship their gods at. But remember, what does the first commandment say? You shall have no other gods before me. So God visits Solomon one day, and he gives him this message. In 1 Kings 11, starting with verse 9, it says, "The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decree, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." You know, I think here's the most important principle out of this entire lesson. Getting your focus off God, it's the root cause. It's the root cause of division. A family or a church that stays close to God puts the biggest wall of protection around them to preserve their unity. You know, the single greatest thing that I can do as your minister is to walk closely and humbly before God. The single greatest thing that I can do as a husband is to walk humbly and closely before God. The greatest thing that I can do as a dad is to walk closely and humbly before God. The same is true for you. On June 14th, 2003, Bo and Ron McCoy partnered up with Rio Hatfield to declare an official truce between the families. It was 140 years after the first fight broke out. The document, it was signed by 60 descendants from both families. Governor Paul Patton of Kentucky and Governor Bob Wise of West Virginia, they signed a proclamation declaring that June 14th was Hatfield and McCoy Reconciliation Day. Rio Hatfield said that he wanted to show that if two families could reach an agreement, then others could as well. And he went on to say the Hatfields and the McCoys symbolizes violence and feuding and fighting. But by signing this, hopefully people will realize that that's not the final chapter. And once again, Jesus says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. You know, I think the opposite is true. A house united within can withstand anything. But you have to fight for it. And you know, the more and more that I look at ministry, and I see different churches, I realize that the only way that we can truly achieve unity is through the guidance and the conviction of the Holy Spirit. I mean, how else in this world can a group of people that comes from such a diverse background come together and find unity and find love? Actually be a family. You know, maybe that's what you're looking for. Maybe you're looking for a family. Maybe a place that you can call home. Or maybe you have never came to Christ at all. And that's what you want to do. You want to surrender to Him. Say, God, I tried to do this life on my own. I've failed every single time. Maybe that's what you want to do. Whatever your decision is, you can come now as we stand and sing.